Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Double Game Week 28 preview where of course we will focus on the best players to bring in for Double Game Week 28 but also have a bit of an eye about blank Game Week 29 and Game Week 30 onwards as well. If you do get any use out of today's video, please make sure to smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I'm fully aware that recently we've spoken about chip strategy a hell of a lot. So if you are sick and tired of that and or you've already decided on your chip strategy, simply just skip to the next section of the video because there is more useful stuff in this video. But I think for a lot of people, they're still a bit unsure. Maybe that's you. Let me know down below in the comments if you are free hitting in 29. And if you're not free hitting in 29, when do you wildcard? And if you are, does that mean you shift the wildcard a bit later? Should you set up for a bench boost? So I thought I would discuss the two popular chip strategies at the moment that you can see on your screen and just discuss in which setups do I think strategy 1 works better and in which setups do I think strategy 2 works better. There are a lot of nuances here though. And for example, let's say you have all of the things that make me think strategy 1 is better, but you've got like 3 or 4 injuries and or the players that you own you're just not happy with, or you just prefer the alternate strategy, then that is absolutely fine. Like it is still incredibly team dependent, and even after listing all of this stuff, I can't give you the best advice for your team without actually looking at the 15 players that you currently have. That being said, the two popular strategies at the moment are strategy 1, which is wildcard 31, free hit 34, bench boost 37, i.e. you are not playing a chip before game week 31, so you get through blank game week 29 without a chip being played, either a wildcard before or a free hit during. And then the other popular strategy is actually you free hit in 29, and because you free hit in 29, you can use your transfers to build for 30 onwards, and therefore you probably don't need the wildcard in 30 or 31, and you can therefore delay the wildcard until after game week 34. So you dead end into double game week 34, you wildcard out of that in 35, and then you bench boost in 37. These are the two popular strategies that are being given at the moment. And I think if you have both the wildcard and the free hit, and potentially even the bench boost as well, I think if you're wildcarding in 29, you don't really, if you're free hitting in 29, you don't really need to wildcard in 30 or 31. And if you're not free hitting in 29, I would assume you probably do need the wildcard in 30 or 31. So hopefully that is clear on the two different strategies that are currently forming. If you have your own strategy, by the way, that's not listed here, just go for it. And if you've already used your wildcard or you're using it this week, then your strategy might change. But I just wanted to go through the two strategies for those with their chips left. So when do I think strategy 1 is best? When do I think wildcard 31, free hit 34, bench boost 37 is the best strategy? I will just caveat by saying I am currently on strategy 1. So if I sound like I slightly favour it, that's because it's my strategy. But I think both could work very well. I think strategy 1 works very well if you already have 5+ players for blank game week 29. If you already feel like you are set up enough that you can get 8 or 9 players out in 29 for maybe 1 or 2 hits. I think in that situation, you're already quite well set up for the blank. Maybe free hitting doesn't gain you that much. So that's the first thing. The second thing is if you can or own already most of Son, Tony, Bowen, Maddison, Watkins, Bailey, Louise, Doughty. The reason I've listed those players is yes, having players is good, right? You want to have probably 8+ players if you can. The number isn't the most important thing because let's say you have 8 players, but 3 of those are like Charlie Taylor, Bell, and Kabore. Well, then 8 doesn't really matter because you're not owning the key players. So as well as wanting to own as many players as possible for the blank, do you own the highly desirable popular players that free hitters will have? And I can promise you, free hitters will have the likes of Son, Tony, Bowen, Maddison, and Watkins. If you can get to most of those already, yes, you might not have 11 players, but you're covering most of the rank threats and you're covering the players that, in all likelihood, are the ones that could go really big. So not only the quantity, but also the quality. The other reason that you might be looking to go for strategy 1 is that your team is currently not in a particularly good place for game week 30 onwards. Maybe you're looking at 3 or 4 injuries in your team. Maybe you don't currently have a Cole Palmer in your team. Maybe you've only got like 1 Arsenal or 1 Man City. And again, they're players you would want to own moving forward. Maybe the structure of your team isn't particularly well set up right now. Maybe you've got too much money invested in the defense. Just in general, if your team's looking like a team you don't really want to carry forward, well, then the free hit 29 and wildcard 35 strategy probably doesn't feel like the best strategy for you. The other reason is maybe you actually prefer Luton assets to Bournemouth assets. And I think most people are like, well, Bournemouth's double's better. We prefer to have Bournemouth players. Bournemouth are a better team. I would say yes, Bournemouth's double is better. And yes, Bournemouth are a better team. But that doesn't necessarily equate to better assets. And as we'll discuss in a second, I don't actually love many of the Bournemouth assets from a FPL perspective, whereas with Luton, no, Luton aren't a great team, and no, the double isn't as good as Bournemouth, but I actually think they have more desirable assets in general, at least outside of the obvious Dominic Solanke. So if you prefer Luton assets, well, then maybe the free hit 29 strategy again doesn't make that much sense, because you can double or triple up in 28, have them for the double, and have them for their really good fixture in 29, but then obviously you don't really want to carry Luton assets beyond that. The final reason that I think you might want to go for strategy 1 is because the upside, you think there might be the upside there in 34, and you don't really see Game Week 29 being particularly high scoring. So let's say you think that the likes of Manchester United and Newcastle, who are about a 70% likelihood to double in Game Week 34, you think, I'd love to have a free hit with triple Newcastle, triple Man United. The other teams that are likely to double aren't great. It's the likes of Crystal Palace and Everton. But if you're thinking, you know, I'd rather just free hit in a double game week. I'd rather free hit and get lots of extra doublers rather than free hitting in a blank. Again, that opportunity is there for you. So those are all the reasons that I think you might want to opt towards strategy 1. You don't have to have all of those, but if you're looking and nodding your head and going, yeah, my team's not that well set up, yeah, maybe I do prefer Luton assets. And actually, I already have 5 or 6 players for Game Week 29. If you're in that position for a lot of these things, then I think you are probably leaning towards this strategy 1. Regarding strategy 2, it's basically the opposite, so I can fly through them a little bit quicker. If you have 4 or less for Game Week 29, then it's fairly obvious you have to free hit in 29, right? I don't see it making sense that you filled 6 or 7 for a massive hit. You're still a little bit down as well. And again, if on top of that, not only do you only have, let's say, 3 or 4 players for 29, but also the 3 or 4 you have are the likes of Taylor, Pau Torres, Pedro Porro, and you don't own Son, Tony, Bowen, Maddison, etc., then you're probably not in a position where you would like to field that team in Game Week 29. On top of that, if your team's actually pretty well set up right now, let's say you already have triple Man City, you've already got triple Arsenal, and you've got a structure where you can get Salah in fairly easy, you might look at it and think, do you know what, this is almost like a Game Week 30, 31 wildcard. I don't actually think my Game Week 30 or 31 wildcard would differ that much. Then again, just free hit and carry that team forward. The other reason is the opposite. You prefer Bournemouth assets to Luton assets. And the reason I say this is after Game Week 29, Bournemouth have very good fixtures, and they currently have about a 50% likelihood to double in 34. So if you load up on Bournemouth, you get them for a brilliant double, you get them for really nice fixtures from 30 and beyond, and potentially you would even have them in double Game Week 34. So that's the other reason. And then the final reason, like I said, is you just think that Game Week 34 could be underwhelming, and actually Game Week 29 could have some high upside. Maybe you look at the likes of Reguilon and Elanga and Awonyi or Morris and just think, you know, I look at Game Week 29 and I actually think there are some cheeky differential punts that we could go for. And actually, I don't really care about loading up on Crystal Palace and Everton doublers in Game Week 34. So your strategy needs to be decided right now. And this is obviously for people that have free hit and wildcard and potentially even bench boost. If you've only got one of the chips, then you need to decide yourself whether you want to really target 29, whether you want to largely ignore it, whether you want to target 34 and 37. But for me, if you've got your 3 chips left, but specifically free hit and wildcard, it's either you free hit now and you maybe delay the wildcard a bit, you wildcard after 29 and therefore use the free hit a little bit later, or the final one is that you wildcard now and then use the free hit in either 29 or 34. That was probably an incredibly confusing section. If you didn't follow, I do massively apologize. But these are the things that I'll be thinking about around strategy 1 and strategy 2. But let me know down below, are you following either of these? What is the reasoning for that? Or do you have your own strategy? And if it is your own strategy, let me know what you're currently planning. So just to recap, in case you zoned out or in case you skipped that first section, what we basically said is if you are free hitting in 29, load up on Bournemouth because they have a great double this week and then they have good fixtures from 30 onwards and they have about a 50% chance of doubling in 34. So if you are free hitting in 29, Bournemouth is probably the route to go above and beyond Luton, simply because I think the double is better this week for Bournemouth, and also Luton assets you don't really want to carry from 30 and beyond, whereas with Bournemouth you can. I think if you aren't free hitting in 29, which is my situation, I think it probably makes more sense to load up on Luton assets. So still watch both of these sections because you could get something useful from them, but I think dependent upon your strategy, you probably either target Bournemouth or Luton a little bit more. In these two sections, I'm going to go through the Bournemouth players that I think are worth considering, and then I'm going to go through the Luton assets that I think are worth considering. I've not mentioned Neto and Kaminsky here, simply because it's just, if you need a goalkeeper, go for it. If you think they have the upside of bringing them in, go for it as well. But I can't really discuss their data or their minutes. They're nailed on. There's no attacking data for them, but they are definitely worth consideration if you have a free goalkeeper spot or if you think they are worth the upside. When we're looking at Bournemouth, I've got 3 defenders listed here. I've then got two forwards and two midfielders. So hopefully a bit of a discussion around the different players that you could bring in and all of the positions. For the defence, sadly, it does look like Senesi or Senesi, whatever you want to call him. Apologies for butchering his name. I'm going to go for Senesi. Apparently, Senesi is out for 4 to 5 weeks, is the news that we got today, which is on Tuesday, the 5th of March. However, we will get an update later on in the week from the press conferences, and it may be that was only an estimation. It could be a little bit better. It could be a little bit worse. But based on the news that we currently have, it does look like Senesi will be out for Double Gameweek 28. And therefore, if you have him, sadly, I think you've got to sell him. And if you don't have him, definitely don't buy him. So the three defenders that we're looking at are probably Zabarnyi, Kerkez, and Smith. What I've got listed in this table is obviously their price, their minutes over the last 6 games, because I think not only do you want the average, it's also nice to see when those minutes came. Then I've got their non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 over the season, and then their non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 over the last 6, to give you a bit of an idea about if their data is trending in the right direction. The colour of the arrow is basically if their data is better over the last 6, it's green. If it's the same, it's grey. And if it is worse, it's red. So for those three defenders, Zabarnyi, Kerkez and Smith, definitely the most nailed is Zabarnyi. As you can see, he's played 90 minutes in every single game this season, but especially again, over the last 6, 90 minutes in every one. So if you're looking for security of minutes, it definitely looks like Zabarnyi is the one to go for. The issue with Zabarnyi is his data is absolutely naff, right? 0.04 non-penalty expected goal involvement over the season and 0.02 over the last 6. So you are bringing him in with absolutely no attacking threat. Sadly, on top of that, he's got no bonus points potential, really. I think only 1 bonus point this season for Zabarnyi, which basically means you are bringing him in for what is likely a 6-pointer and a 2-pointer, if I had to predict, but at a maximum, unless he gets you a lucky goal, 12 points. So you're not bringing in a player here like an Alfie Doughty that could go out in a single game and get you 3 or 4 assists. And that man can, we'll discuss that in a second, because he has the attacking threat to do so. Zabarnyi you are bringing in for the clean sheets. So you have to look at the Sheffield United and Luton games and think, don't just go Sheffield United at home and Luton at home, great fixtures. Do you see Bournemouth, based on the way they have been defending recently, keeping clean sheets in those 2 games? As I said, I think you're probably looking at a 6 and a 2. I think Luton will score, but I think they have a good chance for clean sheet against Sheffield United. So Zabarnyi, if I had to predict now, we'll see if I get this wrong or right, I would guess 8 points in Game Week 28, which is absolutely fine, especially given, like I said, he's got good fixtures from Game Week 30 onwards as well. For Kerkez and Smith, I think they will play both in the double, but it largely depends around the fitness of Aarons and Kelly. It doesn't look like either will be back for Double Game Week 28. But again, assuming you're going to want to own these players beyond Game Week 30 as well, let's assume you're not wildcarding in 30, why is it worth the risk when look at their data? Their data's not any better than Zabarnyi, right? Across the season, ever so slightly better for the 2 of them. And then Kerkez has got slightly better data recently, but we are talking about minimal here. None of these players have any attacking threat. Senesi was the only one to have it. Regarding who's going to partner Zabarnyi, it looks like it will be Mepham in centre-back. Mepham could have a bit more attacking data, or maybe Zabarnyi has better data because they aim for Zabarnyi rather than Senesi. I don't really know. That's a lot of hypothesizing. But basically, to clarify and to simplify, just go for Zabarnyi if you need a Bournemouth defender. I think he is the most straightforward, easy transfer for you. Moving on to the forwards, we have Semenyo and Solanke, and then we have the midfielders of Cliver and Tavernier. I'll start with the forwards, Semenyo and Solanke. Semenyo at 4.5 does offer fantastic value. He's actually been relatively nailed recently. You can see he started the last 3. Before that got 45 and 67. But across the last 3, he's played 77, 90, 90. Having spoken to some Bournemouth fans, they think he might be one of the more nailed attackers after Solanke. The issue is that he's playing more like a winger in real life. He's playing more like a midfielder if you had to categorise him. But in FPL, he is a forward. And forward spots are just so valuable that I don't think many people have a third forward spot. But if you are trying to change your structure around to start to move towards a 3-5-2, which you may well need to do to fit salary in, by the way, bringing in Semenyo right now for maybe, let's say you've got like a João Pedro or just a third spot at the moment that is just open and you've already got a Solanke and or a Watkins, you just think, I've just got that third spot free, then maybe go for him because he is very cheap and he does appear to be playing very good minutes. My issue is that his data isn't particularly good. So even with the good minutes and even with the pass in the eye test and performing well, he's currently sat at about a 0.25 non-penalty expected goal involvement, which if you're familiar with stats, basically means across a 4-game spell, if he got 90 minutes in every game, we would expect him to get 1 attacking return. So we're not probably expecting much even with the decent minutes. But in a double, anything can happen. And again, moving forward, if his minutes are consistent, I think many people on Game Week 30 or 31 wildcard will have Semenyo as their third forward. because you're going to want, again, that money to squeeze in the likes of Son, Salah, Watkins, Saka, Haaland. There's so many players we want to bring in. So Semenyo could be a really nice enabler. But outside being an enabler, I probably wouldn't go there. And then obviously Dominic Solanke, it's just worth bringing him in. There's very little to say other than the only reason that I wouldn't consider bringing him in. It's not whether you're free hitting in 29. I don't care. I would have him regardless of your strategy, and I would captain him regardless of your strategy. The only reason I would not be looking to bring this man in is if there are any doubts around his fitness. Because obviously he played 88 minutes, which is one of the few occasions he's not had 90. He got 88 in game week 27. And he clearly is struggling with an injury that apparently he's been struggling with since game week 20. So I think if he continues to struggle with this, and if there are, again, maybe pictures that he's been missing from training midweek, or Iraola in the press conference says that he's still a bit of a doubt, then maybe you don't risk it and you just go for someone like a Morris, who we'll discuss in a second. But unless there is a real serious amount of doubt, just get him in. Because as you can see across the season, 0.6 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. A big reminder that he's on penalties, by the way. But even if you strip penalties out of it, his data is still very good. And then over the last 6, it's actually been even better than across the season. He's currently sat at a 0.75 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. So, I mean, there is literally nothing to dislike about Solanke as a pick, especially given the fixtures, other than his potential fitness doubt. So definitely look to bring Solanke in regardless of your strategy. And I will definitely be captaining him. Again, unless there are worries, in which case we might look to move to someone like a Carlton Morris. Finally, on the two midfielders that I've got, I know there are the likes of Cook and Christie. I just wouldn't go there. They don't have the attacking data. But the two that I am considering, if I am to free hit 29, or at least bring in a potential pump for game week 28, is Kluivert and Tavernier. I'm really excited by Kluivert as a pick because he passes the eye test. He's just got a bit of flair about him, and it just feels like quite a fun pick because not many people would have him. My issue is the most minutes that he's played this season was actually in game week 27 when he got 72 minutes. He has not played more than 72 minutes on a single occasion this season. And you can see he started the last 3 games, but he played 70, 68, and 72. He actually has, in my opinion, a very good chance of starting both in the double. But if you are looking at, on average, 70 minutes at the very most, you are looking at a maximum of 140 in the double in comparison to someone else that could get you 180. So maybe the upside is there, but he's just not getting the minutes to go alongside it. And so whilst I can sit here and say his data's pretty good, right? 0.45 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 over the last 6, he doesn't get 90 minutes. So when you then strip it back to if this was per 70, the data isn't anywhere near as impressive. So for me, Kluivert is an okay punt, but the minutes just aren't really there to back him fully, which moves us on to probably the second most popular attacker for Bournemouth at the moment, if you look across social media, which is Tavernier. I like it. He's an absolutely fine pick. I think his minutes are being slightly overplayed, or the fact that he's a minutes risk is being slightly overplayed. You can see across the last 6, 90, 45, not great, 68, 90, 67, 90. So he started the last 4 in a row. He started 5 of the last 6, and he's got 90, 67, 90 across the last 3. Having, again, spoken to some Bournemouth fans, they seem to predict that he will be starting both in the double. But that's more so because Iraola seems to love him, not because he's been performing well. If you actually just type in on something like Twitter, Tavernier, you will see lists and lists and lists of Bournemouth fans complaining about his performances. He has not been performing particularly well. Some people seem to think he's got a bit of an attitude problem. And therefore, if you were going off what the fans want, the fans don't want this man in the starting 11 at the moment. So maybe Iraola will listen to that, but by all accounts, it looks like he's a player that he trusts and he seems to like him. Can I confirm a start for him in both games in the double? No. But I would predict yes. I think he'll probably get like 90 and 70 or 90 and 60. So I think you're probably looking at about 150 minutes. But when you look at the data again, is he that great of a pick? I mean, 0.32 and 0.35, depending on the sample size, it's just not particularly fantastic data again. So I'll be entirely honest, I don't really love any of the attackers outside of Solanke. And this is one of the reasons why it just drives me even further towards the no free hit 29 bring in Luton assets category, because I prefer the Luton assets in general, outside again of Solanke, and this just doesn't fill me with that much excitement bringing in triple Bournemouth. So for me, if you are on a wild card or you're looking for triple Bournemouth, it's probably Neto, Zabarnyi, Solanke. I would go double Bournemouth defence, because they've actually defended okay recently and across the season, and the attackers I just don't think have the minutes or the data to really make me that excited. Hopefully that helps you with your Bournemouth dilemmas. So again, the best 3 Bournemouth assets to own for me is Neto in goal, Zabarnyi in defence, and then Solanke up front. So whereas with Bournemouth assets, I would target them if you're free hitting in 29 and looking to save the wildcard, or you've already used the wildcard. With Luton assets, it's the opposite. If you're looking to save the free hit in 29, I would probably target them and have Bournemouth, and or if you are looking to wildcard in 30 or 31, simply because they obviously have a good double this week. They then have a good fixture in 29 against Forest, but from 30 onwards, you don't really want to be carrying your Luton assets forward. They've got no remaining doubles, and the fixtures aren't really there. And again, just with the other players that you could be targeting, having 3 of your spots or 2 of your spots wasted on Luton assets doesn't look great. So for people like me that are saving the free hit and wildcarding shortly after the blank game week, I actually think they are more valuable than Bournemouth. And whilst, again, Luton aren't a better team than Bournemouth, I think we can all agree that, in general, we'd probably back Bournemouth to win more games than Luton. That doesn't really matter. In FPL, it doesn't matter if the team is good. For example, if Luton lose every single game for the remainder of the season, Morris could still be the best forward in FPL. Let's say they score on average 1 goal a game, and Morris scores all of those goals, well then Morris is a great option, right? So try and separate being a good team from having good FPL assets. For example, Man City in the past have always been brilliant teams, but for large spells, we haven't wanted to go near their players because their rotation risks and the goals are spread around them. So I still think Luton could have some very valuable assets. Starting in defence, I've got Mengi and Kabore as 2 cheap options. With Mengi, I don't know that he's fully nailed, but based on his recent performances and starting the last 3, I actually thought he has been, having seen, and I've watched quite a few Luton games, I don't really know why, but recently I've watched quite a few of their games. He's just brilliant, incredibly quick, really solid on the ball. I just think he looks very good. So this is more my opinion than anyone that I've actually spoken to as a Luton fan. I think he looks relatively nailed on at the moment. And I think if you are going for a really cheap asset, given the injuries and issues that they have, he should start, I think, both games in the double and in 29. But if you are a Luton fan and I've got that wrong, please let me know down below. Attacking data-wise, he's really not bringing much to the table. So don't necessarily expect much from him in that sense. I've put Kabore here simply because he's just comfortably the most attacking defender from Bournemouth and Luton if you remove Doughty and obviously the injured Senesi. And a lot of people have asked me, is Kabore likely to start both in the double? My immediate answer is probably no. The thing about Kabore is that he's probably challenging Ogbene for that right wing-back spot for Luton. Because in Kabore's absence, Ogbene has started pretty much every game when Kabore was off at AFCON. You can see at Ogbene's minutes at 90, 90, 90, 90, 90, 84. In fact, the only game that Ogbene didn't start was the recent game in Game Week 27 when Kabore started ahead of him. But then obviously Bell got injured, so Ogbene came on. So I think Kabore and Ogbene are fighting for the same spot. As to who is first choice, I've got no idea. The interesting thing about Ogbene is he's actually listed as a forward in FPL. Not even a midfielder. He's listed as a forward, but he's playing more as like a right wing back. There is a possibility that we see something similar to what we saw in 27 when Bell went off injured, where actually Alfie Doughty plays at left centre-back, and then you can have Kabore and Ogbene as your wing-backs. I think that's a waste of Doughty. So I don't think that's something we'll see every single game. So I do think more often than not, it is one of Kabore and Ogbene. And as a result, it's difficult to go out and suggest one of them as being a fantastic option to bring in or buy, because I just don't know who's going to start. Again, if you're a Luton fan, please let me know down below. And if you're watching this, maybe read the comments and just see if any Luton fans have given us any info. But I think largely they are going to be sharing minutes. And it's a shame because if we look at Ogbene's data, even if he's a forward in FPL, I'm like, it's very good. And he's probably a player that you would be tempted to bring in, again, as a budget option alongside the likes of Semenyo, because he's got the best data out of all the Luton assets, but he's not fully nailed, I don't believe. So that probably rules those out. And to be honest, I don't think you need me to sit here and tell you that if you're going to bring in a defender from Luton, it's Alfie Doughty. Consistently good data. His data's actually improved across the last 6 slightly as well. And his minutes are very good as well. Does he get 90 minutes every game? No, he actually doesn't. You can see 90, 78, 86, 81, 73, 90. So Doughty's not going to get you 90 every game. But importantly, he almost always gets over 60. And actually, an early sub can sometimes be good. If Luton are 1-0 up after 73 minutes, Doughty comes off and they concede, he banks the clean sheet. So I actually don't mind that sometimes with defenders if they get early subs, as long as it's post 60 minutes. So Doughty is just comfortably the best Luton asset to bring in. Attacking data is brilliant. He's on set pieces. He's got multiple routes to points. And if he's playing at centre-back, we've seen with the likes of Luke Shaw, that might make him slightly better for bonus points if he gets an attacking return or keeps a clean sheet. And then if he's at wing-back, then he's just going to be so much better for attacking return. So I don't mind if he's playing left centre-back or left wing-back, but I suppose we probably do want him at left wing-back slightly more. But Alfie Doughty is definitely the best Luton asset to bring in. In the midfield, I think largely you've got two options, which is Tahith Chong and Barkley. For Chong, it's kind of a similar situation to what I was saying with Cliver, that I actually quite like Chong as an option, but I'm just not sure how secure his minutes are. You can see he started the last 3 games with 83, 62, and 67 minutes, but before that, he didn't start any. You can see 19 minutes, 0 minutes, and 37 minutes. So I'm just not sure how secure his minutes are. I think he should have a good chance of starting at least one, if not both, in the double, but doesn't look like he's going to get to 90 minutes. And then you can see that whilst the data has improved recently, we're not looking at him as being in a particularly fantastic FPL option. So Chong is only a player I would consider if you're looking to go super differential and or you are looking for a player that is very, very cheap, then maybe you consider Chong. But outside of that, I just don't see the need to go for him. I probably would prefer to go for a Barkley, because with Barkley, slightly more expensive, but his minutes are so secure. He's got 90 minutes in 5 consecutive games. Before that, it was 81 minutes. And no, his data is not particularly good. You can see here, 0.26 non-penalty expected goal involvement over the season per 90. That is really quite rubbish. But it's actually slightly better across the last 6. You can see here at 0.37 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. So there is a slight improvement in his data, but I still don't see him as being a particularly elite option. And we'll discuss in a second, lots of people looking at Barkley versus Bowen. I would argue even with one less fixture, Bowen might be a slightly better pick because he's just got much greater goal threat. And I think he's just a better FPL asset. And especially if you're looking to wildcard in 31 rather than 30, it might make more sense to go for someone like him or a Maddison. So I don't dislike Barkley. And I think if you are going for a midfielder from Luton, even arguably Luton and Bournemouth, if you look at all of the midfielders that double in 28, Barkley is arguably the best one. I just still am not particularly blown away by that data. And I think for large spells, you are relying on what is probably a shot from outside the box to get you an attacking return if it's not an assist. So I don't mind him. I'm not going to trash talk Barkley. I'm just sat on the fence at the moment. I might bring him in myself this week, but I'm kind of thinking I might just go for Bowen instead. Finally, we'll talk about Carlton Morris. I wanted his data to be slightly better than this because I am currently looking at Morris, Haaland to Morris, selling the best asset we've ever had in FPL for Carlton Morris. And I'm going to discuss that in more detail a bit later in the video. But his data's not that great. Right, across the season, really quite poor actually at 0.29 at non-penalty expected goal involvement. But there has been an improvement across the last 6 up to 0.38, which is much more respectable. And on top of that, he is a 90-minute man. He will be getting 90 minutes at the moment. You can see in the last 3 he's played 90. He's actually started 6 in a row now for Luton. After losing his place temporarily, with Adebayo out, he has to play pretty much every minute available for Luton. And what we love about Morris is he is on penalties. And Luton have actually had a decent number of penalties this season. So maybe that will continue. And I just think with a player that is getting you 3 fixtures across the next 2 weeks and 3 good fixtures at that against Palace, Bournemouth and Forest, you can definitely do worse than a 90-minute man on penalties with okay underlying data. But it's not overwhelmingly good. And I don't look at this and go, you have to go out there and get Carlton Morris. And I don't look at this and think Carlton Morris is a better pick than Solanke. There is not a world in which Morris is a better pick than Solanke. I just think Solanke is in a world of his own in comparison to Carlton Morris, especially given, again, they are both 90-minute men on penalties. The underlying data is just so comfortably in favour of Solanke. So even if you're on a free hit 29, or if you're not on a free hit 29 strategy, I think I still prefer Solanke to Morris, even with the fact that Morris will give you an extra fixture. But outside of Solanke, is Morris going to score more points than the likes of Haaland? We'll discuss that in a bit, maybe, because he's got all the extra fixtures, and this data isn't awful. So hopefully that helps you with Luton. So for Luton assets, again, Kaminsky is an option that I would probably consider above some of these. The best 3 Luton assets for me is probably Doughty, Barkley and Morris. Maybe Kaminsky instead of Barkley. But really, I think Doughty and Morris are the 2 that I would be targeting ahead of the rest. So to confirm, for Bournemouth, it's Neto, Zabarnyi and Solanke. For Luton, it's probably Doughty, Barkley and Morris. Hopefully that helps you. So in the spirit of making sure that I've answered all of your questions around Bournemouth and Luton, I've just copied some of the questions over that you've asked me from Twitter on Bournemouth and Luton assets on top of what I've already said. There might be a little bit of repetition here, but I'll try my best to fly through these questions. So the first question is, -4 for a Bournemouth defender is definitely worth it, isn't it? Probably for a lot of people. Again, especially if you're looking to free hit 29 and not wildcard in 30 or 31. But as I said, not much attacking threat, not great bonus points potential. Unless you're expecting 2 clean sheets, you're probably looking at a maximum of 8 points. So I wouldn't go out there and say, yes, it's worth removing the likes of Saliba for Zabarnyi. I don't think so, because Saliba's got a good chance for 6 points in any given game. And so in that position, you need Zabarnyi to get 10 plus points. So no, I don't think it's definitely worth it. But in most cases, I think it's certainly not a bad option to bring in a Bournemouth player for a -4. Do I think triple captain on Solanke is the best triple captain of the season? I would probably argue yes. Given the fixtures, given the data, and given the fact he's on pens and good for 90, assuming he's fit, I don't see many better opportunities in isolation. But do remember that in game week 37, Salah and Haaland are both likely to double. The issue of waiting until 37 is if the league is wrapped up for whoever, it could be Arsenal, Liverpool, or City, then how do we even know that Haaland and Salah will play both? We saw last season, Haaland actually missed one game in 37 and he missed game week 38. And so I don't know if triple captain Haaland will actually work in 37. And on top of that, lots of people are looking to free hit or bench boost in that week. So, and then you could go in 34 in the likes of maybe a Bruno Fernandes if he has a decent double, but is that better than Solanke? I don't think so. So yes, I do think if you've still got the triple captain, I would go on Solanke in 28. And then the third question was target Bournemouth and free hit 29 or target Luton and save free hit 29. Hopefully I've answered that in enough detail. It really comes down to the quantity and quality of the players you already have that have a fixture in 29 and how well set up your team is from 30 onwards to decide whether or not to play it. But I think in general, a lot of people say obviously go for Luton and free hit 29 because that's their strategy. But do consider the alternative that bringing in Luton assets could go quite well and it would allow you to then wildcard in 30 or 31. Assuming you are planning to free hit in 29, are there any double game week players worth getting in for a hit apart from Solanke? As I said, I don't mind a Neto. I don't mind a Zabarnyi. I wouldn't personally be going for the likes of Tavernier and Kluivert because whilst they might be okay for 28, the risk around minutes and the fact they're not particularly fantastic assets would make me not want to own them that much longer term. So yes for Neto, yes for Zabarnyi, again, yes for Solanke. Outside of that, I'm not sure I'd be that interested in any of the Bournemouth assets. And then from Luton, taking a hit for one of them, especially considering you're free hitting in 29, I don't think I would bother taking a hit for a Luton player if you're free hitting in 29, personally. Question 5 was, is it worth doing a -4 for Neto instead of playing Areola? I'm currently considering this myself. The question really comes down to, do you think Neto outscores Areola by 4 points? But also, again, are you looking to free hit in 29? Are you looking to wildcard in 30 or 31? Because these things are important too. If I'm wildcarding in 31, for example, it's not only does Neto outscore Areola by 4 points this week, but it's in 30 then. I would be bringing in Neto for Kelleher. So does Neto also outscore Kelleher in game week 30? Again, if you're then owning Neto beyond that, let's say you're wildcarding in 35, then I think it is worth doing a -4 for Neto this week because he could double in 34. And also he's got good fixtures from 30 until 34 anyway. Hopefully that makes sense, but I think dependent upon your strategy, it is absolutely at least worth considering bringing in Neto for your other goalkeeper this week, Dubravka, Kelleher, whoever it is, and then playing Areola if you want to, and playing ahead of Areola this week. I would not bring in Neto for Areola unless, again, you are free hitting in 29. I'm sure this has got too confusing for some people. The final question was around, like I said, Jarrod Bowen or Barkley. I'm actually leaning towards Jarrod Bowen slightly more at the moment. An extra fixture is incredibly useful, especially given that fixture, in this case, is let's say the extra fixture for Barkley is Bournemouth away. It's not a bad fixture by any means, but an extra fixture doesn't make a worse asset that much better than a good asset. And I think Jarrod Bowen in FPL is a very good asset. Across the season, his goal threat is so good. It's one of the best 4 midfielders in the league. And I just back Bowen to get more points in a normal game week than Barkley. So with one less fixture, could Bowen still serve me well? Especially given he's got Burnley at home in 28. I'm starting to lean towards yes. So I would say I'm currently 60% in favour of Bowen, 40% Barkley. I do think it's very close though, and the extra fixture is always useful. I'd love to know down below if you're considering Bowen or Barkley, which way are you currently leaning? So this is the final question or set of questions around Luton and Bournemouth, but obviously it makes sense. A lot of people this week will go for either Luton or Bournemouth. They are the two teams doubling, so we are going to discuss them in more detail this week. But there is a section at the end where I talk about if you're not interested in Luton and Bournemouth, what do you do with your transfers this week? But as I said, I wanted to discuss in a bit more detail Man City assets to Luton assets because I spoke about in my transfer plans video, which if you've not yet seen was released on Monday. You can go and watch that after this video. I speak about the fact that I am very tempted by a -8 to sell Ake, Foden and Haaland for Doughty, Barkley and Morris. As I just said, that might be Bowen instead of Barkley now. But that obviously raises a lot of eyebrows when a big content creator goes out and says, I'm going to sell 3 of my City assets for 3 Luton assets for a -8. So Is it crazy, and what's the logic behind it? It just comes down to quantity of fixtures, but also difficulty of fixtures as well. City have Liverpool blank Arsenal. And I'm going to largely disregard Arsenal now because you could wildcard in 30 if you want to, and I may well do so. But over the next two, it's Liverpool and blank. Over the next two, Luton have Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and Forest. So there's two things to note here. The Liverpool fixture isn't great. And I know it is a weakened Liverpool team, and in the past, there have been some goals in these games, but I think for the most part, City have not particularly enjoyed going to Anfield in the past. Not that they haven't scored goals, but it's not been an easy fixture for them. I think this could go one of two ways. It could be 4-4 that game, or it could be a bit of a stalemate. I wouldn't be surprised, not if they both settle for a draw, but it's just a little bit hesitant from the two of them. If that's the case and they blank, I mean, you're getting 2 points from Haaland and Foden. And I know that's best case scenario for someone that's selling them, but it's just not a particularly high upside fixture. On top of that, I don't see anyone really captaining the likes of Haaland, and definitely not Foden, in game week 28. You've got double game weeks. Everyone's going to be on Solanke. And even if Solanke was injured, I still don't think you captain Haaland. I think you captain either someone like a Morris, or you go and captain a Doughty, or you just go for another single game week player outside of Haaland. I don't think there'll be many captaining Haaland. So the damage that you would usually do isn't that high. And then on top of that, like I said, you get 3 bites of the cherry with Morris. 1 penalty in there, and you're laughing. A couple of other returns in there, a lot of lucky assists, just through appearance points alone. If he gets you 2 appearance points in each, gets you a goal and some bonus and an assist, you could be looking at 15 plus points from very little from Morris across the next 3. And his points per match has been over 4 this season. Morris has actually been a very good asset. So I think potentially it could be worth it doing something like a Haaland to Morris to get 3 fixtures versus 1, especially given the 1 for Haaland is Liverpool and the 3 for Morris are Palace, Bournemouth and Forest. I'm not telling you should go out and do that. And I'm not telling you that this is an obvious transfer to make if you're not free in 29. I see some people say it's like the most easy transfer ever to do Haaland. That's ridiculous. Of course it's not. You're selling Haaland for Morris. But I would certainly consider it. Because like I said, just through appearance points alone, you make back the -4. Then outside it, you get 3 bites of the cherry versus 1, and it's not a good one for Haaland. If Haaland was playing against, I don't know, Luton at home, let's say as an example, I wouldn't be selling Haaland this week. But I'm okay banking against him, against Liverpool, given that's his only fixture. And then, like I said, if you decide to wildcard in 31, he's got Arsenal in 30. So I definitely think it's worth considering. With Foden to Barkley, I'm less convinced by it, and that's why I'm looking at Foden to Bowen, simply because with Barkley, there's no pens, his data's not as good as Morris's, and I think there is a chance that he sits slightly deeper, given the fact that Lokonga's out. So I think there is a world in which Barkley just blanks in all 3, and if Foden does anything therefore against Liverpool, it could go fairly badly for you. So, no, I don't think it's crazy. Yes, I think you should consider it, but I'm not saying you should go out and do it. The other question was around if you are selling Haaland and Foden, and are you not concerned about lost budget? So this is actually a really good question, right? I'm going to just skip over to the fantasy football, official fantasy football website, whatever it's called, FPL website, and just show you what I mean by this, because we are going to be looking to wildcard fairly soon. And even if you're not looking to wildcard, you might be looking to try and squeeze a salary into your team at some point, on top of all of the other expensive assets. Budget will become an issue again at some point. So ignore my team because it looks a state right now, but I'll be bringing in Luton assets very soon. If you go onto transfers on the official site, I just wanted to show you how to find this. And then if you go onto list, what you can see for each of the players, this PP bit here, so this column here, PP, that's your purchase price. You've then got your selling price and you've got their current price, right? So let's use Phil Foden as an example. I bought Phil Foden for 7.6 and I can sell him for 7.9. He's currently actually 8.2 million. So let's say I sell him for 7.9 and he doesn't change in price before I want to buy him back on a wildcard in 31. I am technically losing 0.3 million on Foden because I have to sell him for 7.9 and I buy him back for 8.2. So that's not good for me at all, right? I'm losing 0.3 million on asset I want to own. And unfortunately, it's the same for Haaland. I can sell Haaland now for 14.2 and then I would have to buy him back for 14.5. So if Foden and Haaland don't change in price between when I sell them and when I'd like to buy them back, I am losing 0.6 million on Haaland and Foden. That is a lot of money. That does genuinely need to be considered. And I think that is a major risk that you are taking by selling them. My counter argument to it, though, on top of saying that obviously I don't think that's ideal, is there are points to be gained in the meantime. If it goes well for you and you gain 15 to 20 points, would I trade 15 to 20 points for 0.6 loss? I probably would. because money means nothing if you don't translate it to points. And sometimes we overplay slightly the importance of team value. All it might mean is rather than an Ake on my wildcard, I have to go for someone that's 4.5 instead, a Reguilon or something like that. No, that's not ideal. You do have to make sacrifices, but it's not like I'm saying therefore I'm going to lose out on having Salah in my team. It's not that bad. So, yes, something to consider. I think the other thing that is different for me, and this is not a flex, by the way, is my team value is 106.1 million. I'm just scrolling down. If you go onto your team on the official page, you can see 106.1. I have pretty good team value anyway. So I still think even after a 0.6 loss, I will be better off than a lot of people. So I think for me, I'm much happier to eat that loss than a lot of other people. If your team value is already really low, then yeah, maybe it's slightly more tempting to just hold on to them. So hopefully that answers your question. I do think it is something to consider, the loss. But no, I don't think it's crazy to sell Man City assets for Luton assets when you consider the additional 2 fixtures, the better fixtures. But if you are free hitting in 29, obviously definitely don't do it. So this final section is anti-double game week. People that don't really want to target Bournemouth and Luton. And to be honest, if you're one of those people, you probably switched off during the first 30 to 40 minutes where I spoke about the assets. But anyway, someone asked the question, what are the best transfers if we don't want to target Luton and Bournemouth? I actually can't find any content creators tackling this one. And I laugh at that because I've literally just done the exact thing that you've said there, which is just spend loads of time talking about Luton and Bournemouth. But it makes sense. If you're not free hitting in 29, bring in players that not only have a fixture in 29, but also double this week. And if you're not free hitting in 29, why not bring in Bournemouth assets that double this week and have good fixtures from 30 onwards? So I think the reason you can't see any content creators tackling this one is because it doesn't make that much sense to me to ignore Bournemouth and Luton based on whatever chip strategy you're going for. But let's say you still want to, or you've already got a few assets. Let's say you already own like Doughty, Morris, Solanke, and you want to target some other players. If you're not free hitting in 29, it's fairly obvious. It's the likes of Son, Watkins, Bowen, Tony, Maddison, Bailey, Louise, and obviously the defenders as well on top of that. I think that's fairly straightforward, the players that you should be targeting, the players that have fixtures in 29. I think top of the list for me would be Son, Watkins, Bowen, and maybe Tony. Maddison, Bailey, Louise, slightly lower down the list. Where it gets interesting, I think, is free hit 29. Because if you're free hit 29, you can bring in players that maybe have an okay fixture this week, but also set you up for 30 onwards. Because again, you'll be free hitting in 29, so you don't have to worry about that week. I've still got Solanke top of the list because he has to be. Even though we're doing the opposite of that in this section, Solanke still should be your priority transfer this week. But if you're not, there are quite a few players that you can bring in that people that are not free hit in 29 can't really target. Cole Palmer would be right up there. Burnley at home in game week 30 and then good fixtures beyond that for Chelsea. If you've not got Palmer because you sold him, I'd be looking to bring Palmer back in. Newcastle this week is actually a pretty good fixture as well. So Palmer would be up there. Speaking of Newcastle, Isak. Given the injuries that they have, assuming that he can stay fit, Isak is just a brilliant FPL option anytime that he can stay fit and his minutes are okay. So if you're backing him to stay fit finally, Isak could be a really interesting transfer that not many people will have from 30 onwards. Alongside that, I think Gordon's fine as well. Then you've got Liverpool assets who, yes, they play Man City this week, but from 30 onwards, we are going to want at least 2, probably 3 Liverpool assets. So the likes of Salah and Darwin, and apparently Salah might be back in training now, is the latest rumour I've heard, then Salah could be brilliant. Darwin looks fit and firing and ready to go as well. Bring in Liverpool assets. If they get anything against City, bonus, but then you have them from 30 onwards. You've then got, obviously, Arsenal assets, I think are still worth bringing in because I think, again, from 31 onwards, you are going to want to own triple Arsenal for the back end of the season. And then the final team that I'd be considering is maybe Crystal Palace. And whilst they don't have that many assets to consider, if Eze can stay fit now, Crystal Palace have a good chance of a double in 34, and their fixtures aren't bad outside of that. So Eze could even be a cheeky punt. Although, again, I'm not sure that you want to go out and buy him this week. So, hopefully that helps you to target the players. But again, I still think that based on the fact that they double this week and they suit either the free hit or no free hit strategy, Luton and Bournemouth make the most sense to bring in. But if not, hopefully that section's helped you. So guys, there you have it. That is my very long Double Game Week 28 preview. Hopefully that has helped you with your key decisions, especially around Bournemouth, Luton assets, and also your chip strategy as well. If you did enjoy today's video and you're still watching at this point, please smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. Let's aim for 2,000 likes on this video. And as I said in the previous video, I'm aiming for 115,000 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you could also subscribe to the channel, I would really, really appreciate that as well. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.